December 1940, just a year before Pearl Harbor, Richmond was a contented industrial community of 23,000 people. Its long waterfront of tidelands and mud flats on the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay was punctuated by embryonic harbor development. The tempo of Richmond was that of any simple and conservative American town. Only the straggling traveler and an occasional train stopped at this community. Then it happened. A banner headline roused the entire area. That was December 20th, 1940. Almost immediately, engineers were at work. Construction of a seven-way shipyard and the rainiest season in Richmond history started simultaneously. Men worked through 53 consecutive days of steady downpour. On they toiled, never stopping. All were caught in the mad rush to erect the original Richmond shipyard. Europe was plunged in war. Here was to be a plant to deliver 30 sorely needed 10,000-ton cargo ships to Great Britain in 15 months, a production schedule unprecedented in the annals of shipbuilding. The coming of the shipyard here was of momentous importance, but few realized the magnitude of events to follow. On April 14th, 1941, as piles were being driven, buildings constructed, whirly cranes erected, and assembly platforms prepared, a mobile crane lowered the first keel plate, and a cheer arose. But more was to come. Hardly was that keel in place when a sister yard of 6 ways was ordered. This one to construct American Liberty ships for the expanding program of the United States Maritime Commission. 56,000 piles were driven. 5.25 million cubic yards of earth were moved to make from another stretch of Richmond's mud flats, Yard 2. Certainly its builders hardly anticipated that Yards 1 and 2 and the others to come would deliver 747 ships in the next 4 years. As Yard 2 prepared for its initial keel laying, back at Yard 1, Henry Kaiser spoke. The ship was released, and Mrs. Emory Land, wife of the brilliant chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, christened Richmond's firstborn the Ocean Vanguard, which slipped into San Francisco Bay on August 16, 1941. At Yard 2, steel was passing through the new plate shop and being fashioned on assembly platforms into double-bottom units. Even while this was going on, whirly cranes had arrived and were being erected. Yes, ships and yard grew together. Beyond the assembly tables, the slanting platform which was to become the launching ways was ready for the first keel on September 17, 1941. Within a few hours, the keel-length ribbon of steel was expanding into a full-bottom shell as staging arose alongside. On December 31st, this keel, now Richmond's first American Liberty hull, was ready for launching. With elaborate preparation and much fanfare, she was christened the James Otis and slid into the bay in the record time of 105 days on the waves. The atrocity of Pearl Harbor had occurred but a few weeks before, and ships and more ships were the #1 need of the day. As the outfitting of the James Otis commenced, the entire tempo of shipbuilding was accelerated to fit the requirements of a country at war. By this time, the sinking of American shipping had reached alarming proportions. More shipyards and more ships were the Allies' prime need. On January 9, 1942, Kaiser Company contracted to level Richmond's Point Potrero, a long, hilly promontory, there to build the world's most modern shipyard, and in it, C-4 troop ships. The hill was cut through to permit work in both directions. Over 4 million tons of earth and rock were leveled to expand the site. Beyond the point, a cofferdam was constructed, behind which 5 basins or graving docks were to be blasted from solid rock below the level of the bay. The hill was flattened and spread over the landscape to provide storage and parking areas. As soon as the sites were leveled, engineers laid out lines and drillers commenced the excavation of the 5 basins even before all the rocky crags of Point Potrero had been removed. Foundations were started immediately for Yard 3's greatest landmark, the 4-story concrete warehouse, a monument to modern design. On May 14th, down behind the cofferdam, long before the basin walls were completed, a simple but significant ceremony marked the laying of the first keel for a C-4 troop ship. Almost immediately, at the challenge of the Maritime Commission, a 4th yard was announced. Typified by ways that were almost flat and by the familiar improvised bridge cranes, Yard 4, within 2 months after the start of construction, was ready to assemble sections of urgently needed landing ships known as LSTs. In the meantime, Yard 3 was coming of age. Hull number 1 awaited launching. On November 25th, 1942, Basin 3 received her first baptism of bay water. Kay Kaiser acted as master of ceremonies and conducted his famous band, while the sponsor, Miss Anne Somerville, daughter of General Brehon Somerville, swung the traditional champagne bottle. The USS General George O. Squire was towed out to the cheers of 20,000 Yard 3 patriots. The Squire nosed into the outfitting dock, where shortly she was joined by sister ships from other basins. Assemblies were now busy prefabricating hull units, and full-speed production was underway. C-4s were looming above the rims of the basin. A career of spectacular production had started. By this time, Yard 2 had expanded to 12 ways, as Yard 1 completed its last British ship. Combined under the name of the Permanente Metals Corporation, Yards 1 and 2 were to establish world's records for quantity production, speed, consistent low cost, and highest quality of the nation's 18 Liberty shipyards, as reported by the Truman Investigating Committee. Hull 440, the world-renowned 4.5-day Robert E. Peary, was Yard 2's crowning achievement, living up to its builders' fondest expectations. By November 7th, 1942, every available surface and corner near Way 1 was occupied by prefabricated parts. Huge units, such as the engine, were completely pre-assembled. Shaft alleys, bulkheads, and inner bottoms were combined into one complete lid. For the first time, the after-peak and stern casting were one. Each section was ready, shores and staging were in place, when the keel unit was laid on November 8, 1942. At 12:01 a.m., a thunderbolt of activity was released. "36 hours later, a hull had appeared, and almost half the Robert E. Peary was in place, including engines and boilers. The first piece of main deck went aboard with the fantail unit inside of 48 hours. Massive forecastle, complete even to the ship's name, moved to Way 1. The main deck went aboard, 5 entirely complete sections, each with its own hatch framework. Less than 80 hours from keel laying, the after-deck house arrived ahead of schedule. As 2 cranes lifted the gigantic unit, it looked like a stage set, with interior fittings and equipment complete even to final paint and decoration. On the morning of the fourth day, the launching anchors were hauled aboard, and Hull 440 was made ready for her maiden splash into the bay. Work continued until the very last moment, but the results were well worth the pressure and strain. At the appointed moment, 30,000 proud and weary shipbuilders watched Mrs. James F. Burns christen the Robert E. Peary. When Hull 440 slid triumphantly down the ways, a cheer went up that echoed round the world, a tribute to the determined men and women who had accomplished the amazing feat of launching a 92% completed ship in 4 days, 15 hours, and 27 minutes, an all-time record. Before her bow had hit the water, another keel was lowered, for not a minute could be lost in maintaining Richmond's production rate. Less than 3 days later, the Peary was delivered and departed, hopeful but not fully realizing that she was destined for a long and spectacular war career. Then followed launchings in numbers that were veritably epidemic. At any time the tide dictated, day or night, rain or shine, ships quietly slipped into San Francisco Bay, faster and faster. By the fall of 1943, more than one ship a day left Richmond, the most colossal shipbuilding spectacle the world had ever witnessed. Early in 1944, Yard 1 had completed its Liberty contracts and had started launching the Maritime Commission's new Victory ship, a larger, sleeker, faster, and more powerful vessel. On July 1st, a small replica of the Statue of Liberty was unveiled, marking the launching of Permanente's 519th and the Pacific Coast's last Liberty ship. Richmond had produced 23% of the nation's total Liberty output of 3 years. Immediately, Yard 2 filled adjacent mudflats, there to construct the Victory Yard. With this, facilities were completed in 1944 to make Richmond Shipyard the world's largest, covering 880 acres and 4.5 miles of waterfront. Behind this modern maze of machinery and equipment, with its planning, order, and system, are its people. Here was assembled one of the nation's largest industrial armies. People came by the thousands and tens of thousands, some for profit, some for patriotism, some to avenge a wartime loss. From each state in the Union and almost every hamlet in the nation, these 20th century pioneers converged on San Francisco Bay. Many came to find a new life, to clutch at an exciting adventure, but primarily every last individual wanted to help win a war. Various kinds of people, from every creed, every nationality, every race, all ages, and believe it or not, all sizes. People from myriad walks of life, the socialite, professor, housewife, the actor, musician, bank clerk, school teacher, the lawyer. Less than 2% had seen a shipyard or even a ship. In 2 years' time, the original payroll of 4,000 at Yard 1 had skyrocketed to 93,000 in the combined Richmond yards. The newcomer became a member of the shipyard family by signing at the employment office. He was recorded as a home front worker and secured his union membership and clearance. He was fingerprinted and photographed for the permanent record and for his badge. He could authorize a payroll deduction or the purchase of war bonds. At another window, he was introduced to the benefits of the Permanente health plan. While the 6 first aid stations in the yards administered to all industrial needs, health plan members for 50 cents per week received non-industrial attention and complete health protection. They could go to the field hospital for full diagnosis and treatment, or to the larger Permanente Foundation Hospital in Oakland. 91% of the employees subscribed, making it the largest voluntary health plan in America. A housing bureau assisted in arranging shelter. Modern villages were created. Countless small homes were available for economical purchase with government help. A single man could find a place in one of the many dormitories. while on every vacant lot, war apartments were erected for family use. Comfortable dwellings of varying size and type rented for less than $40 a month. New housing totaled 24,000 units. Still, few employees found homes close enough to eliminate the transportation problem. Shift changes created peak traffic loads. Every means of conveyance had to be set up. Bus lines were extended to the shipyards from all Bay Region communities. 90 cars from New York City's abandoned elevated railway were imported to ply the 12 miles of the new electric railroad between Richmond and Oakland. Direct ferries served San Francisco residents on every ship. Still, of necessity, the majority used automobiles. Parking and road facilities were expanded. Because of gasoline and tire shortages, ride bureaus in each yard assisted in carpool operations. Those needing rides and those providing them cleared through these bureaus. Here also they received their supplemental gas rations. Richmond shipbuilders topped the nation in the share the ride principle, averaged more than 4 riders per car. Early lack of store facilities was overcome through the establishment of large supermarkets, stocked to provide for every household need. These crowded each other along war-creative thoroughfares. Cafeterias, coffee shops, and fountains mushroomed all over the new population centers, dispensing nutrition for shipbuilding energy. In 2 years, Little Richmond of 23,000 had become a bustling metropolis of 130,000. This fabulous growth necessitated civic expansion. New firehouses were established. Well-trained plant protection staffs guarded shipyard lives and property. New school buildings were erected quickly to accommodate a school enrollment which totaled 2,000 more than Richmond's entire population before the coming of the shipyards. Teachers and buildings alike did double duty, yet 2 shifts a day could barely meet the demand. 27% of Richmond shipbuilders were women. Feminine workers with small children inspired the founding of 35 nursery school units and 10 extended daycare centers, which mothered over 1,400 youngsters at a time. On their way to work, parents left their hopefuls at one of the nursery schools, knowing that the daily routine, commencing with a physical checkup and followed by organized play, would make their children both healthy and happy. Budding Rembrandts wielded brushes with questionable effect, while young Tarzans swung atop the monkey maze. Future torch singers or choir members gathered around the piano as tiny fists provided the percussion. The 50-cent daily fee included mid-morning and afternoon nourishment, as well as a hot, balanced lunch. Indeed, these were the future citizens in the making. With our new employees established in the community and listed on the payroll, they were assigned to a suitable craft and entered an induction program. Training was offered in most every shipyard craft and many allied subjects. Electricians were taught in a trade school, with each student learning a job specialty. A similar training program applied to the pipe fitting trade. Prospective machinists learned the technical knowledge of their craft by actual practice. Even experienced employees took advantage of special advanced courses, while thousands learned the technique of the burner's torch, the tool which cuts through steel as a knife cuts through butter. Or they might attend welding school. After 6 days training, the average welder student could start simple production welding. Job simplification and the training of 500,000 persons, most of whom had no previous industrial experience, were without doubt the most incredible achievement of the entire shipbuilding program. Each learned to do his special task skillfully, and the combined results turned out ships faster than any generation had imagined possible. Let's see how these new shipbuilders created a victory ship from start to finish at one of the Permanente yards. First, let's observe some of the operations and skills necessary for the erection of a ship on the waves. The creation of a ship has its beginning in the brain of the marine architect. In the engineering department, thousands of plans are skillfully drawn and integrated by draftsmen. Detailed plans are sent to the mold loft, where ship's lines are projected to actual dimensions on the mold loft floor. The loftsman, working from these lines, fabricates templates from soft killed dried wood, which are used as patterns on steel. From the mold loft, the finished templates are carried to the plate shop, where their outlines are translated to steel plates. The steel itself comes in the 140 carloads of supplies that arrive daily and are distributed over the yard's 16-mile railroad system. Some plates are unloaded from cars by giant electromagnets. The crane operator, by manipulating a switch, controls the adhesion of the plate to the magnet. Other plates are removed by a giant hammerhead crane imported from Cooley Dam, which spans 100 yards, the length of a football field. The journey of steel from rough plate to finished ship starts at the plate shop. Ship fitters outline the patterns on the raw steel with soapstone. Punch marks within the patterns are later used as reference points. On each plate is painted identification marks and numbers. Automatic burning machines carry the cutting torch along these designated lines. Larger machines use a number of torches in making parallel or bevel cuts in a single operation. An interesting mechanism is the multiple burner created at Yard 2. A giant pantograph with 10 burning nozzles is operated by one person who guides it around the form to be duplicated in steel, burning 10 shapes in a single operation. Portholes and other circular openings are cut out by an automatic burner which revolves around a pivot point. Odd shapes and uneven surfaces require the individual skill of the hand burner. Smaller, thinner pieces are cut and trimmed in a giant power shear. To assume the various curves of a ship's hull, certain plates must be bent. These receive their prescribed curvature by going through a set of rollers 32 feet long. One corner of the plate shop is inhabited by a group of burly individuals known as slab men. They pull from the mouths of gas furnaces cherry red forms of steel which they shape into the ribs of the vessel. As they guide pneumatic rams and swing 20-pound sledgehammers, their brawn and sweat combine with heat and metal to fashion the interesting framework which makes the graceful contour of a hull. Most vital in the construction of modern steel vessels is the comparatively new science of electric arc welding. Looking like demons from Mars, the hooded craftsmen fuse pieces of steel together, making a welded joint stronger even than the parent metal. In vertical, overhead, or odd positions, and on the ship proper, the experienced hand welder is king. His tool is a stinger which holds the welding rod. He views the blinding arc through a dense glass window in his hood, maneuvering a continuous arc which melts the rod and fuses all touching metals. The automatic welding machine joins flat seams and butts with speedy efficiency. After edges are cleaned by a rotary steel brush, the machine travels down the seam, leaving a path of molten fused metal covered by a flux, which is picked up by vacuum for reuse. While many holes are punched automatically, drilling crews must precede the riveter. Although modern ships, for the most part, are welded, rivets connect certain members, and crews of riveters still ply their noisy trade to join these parts together. The craftsman responsible for placing all parts in position so that they may be joined into a solid unit is the flanger. He uses a variety of traditional tools to bring members into exact position and is identified by his ever-present hammer. The shipyard horizon is characterized by the spectacular whirly crane. This one-armed giant, appearing to possess human faculties, can dangle 50 tons or more from the extremity of its 100-foot boom. Its brain is in a lofty little cab where an operator manipulates levers to make it do his bidding. The crane operator responds to hand signals of the riggers on the ground. Then there's that weird and wonderful creature out of a fantasy world, the heister, actually one of the most valuable creations developed for transporting material. Who hasn't had the impulse to dash between its straddling legs? There are a multitude of other artisans too. The blacksmiths with modern forge equipment, coppersmiths reviving an almost lost art, shop machinists controlling equipment of enormous power, laborers maintaining a clean and safe yard. These and many more craftspeople with varieties of skills and techniques prepare for the actual erection of the ship on the ways. Now the scene changes to the shipways, where field engineers establish lines for the new hull, while shipwrights salvage the thick wax just used to launch the preceding hull. Instead of a narrow single plate, now the first keel unit is nearly the width of the ship and 45 feet long. Only a few such keel sections are placed before the double-bottom units are lowered into position. These units are fabricated upside down in the double-bottom plant, where cranes lower the various cell walls into jigs, which hold them in position while they're tack welded. Then they're lifted, still inverted, to tables where welding is completed and piping installed. When finished, the riggers take over, turn it right side up, carefully guide it to a trailer where it's piled with other sections and sped off to its place alongside sister units. Welders work inside these cells, completing the 7.5 miles of welding that fuses them into a rigid honeycomb of steel. Meanwhile, bulkheads are arriving overhead. The largest of these transverse partitions, with a portion of a fuel oil settling tank appended, belongs just aft of the engine room. With double bottoms and bulkheads in place, the side shell is moved in to form the vertical outside wall, and gradually the ship is becoming enclosed. Now we are ready for the boilers, which are assembled in boiler bays at the prefabrication plant. These are received from the manufacturers, knocked down, are put together, tested under steam pressure, given a primer coat of paint, then jacked up and hauled away to their permanent home in the bottom of the hull. heart of a ship is the propulsion machinery. On arrival, gears are disassembled and parts cleaned, checked and polished to assure perfection of performance. This requires the precision and accuracy of the watchmaker's art, but on a colossal scale. The machinists have a special building for the reassembling operation. Sections of the case are prepared outside, then hoisted over and lowered into position. When all parts are inside, on goes the lid. Then she emerges, reassembled, ready for a permanent home in the new engine room. The turbine itself and other elements of the propulsion and engine room equipment follow into place. The after deep tank is created on end in jigs, with the various craftsmen working conveniently from temporary staging. This section, when lowered to position just forward of the stern, stretches from the flat keel to the second deck. The after peak is a union of steel and stern casting which will carry the propeller and rudder. The casting itself is a fusion of 4 matching pieces which are joined by an ingenious method called thermit welding. A form is prepared around the ends to be joined to act as a funnel. Hoppers of thermite are placed over the form, which is touched off by a red-hot rod. In 30 seconds, the contents are a 7,000 degrees molten mass. When released into the joint, the casting ends are fused into a solid unit. At night, the process outsparkles the 4th of July. After cooling for 12 hours, the finished product is stronger than the original casting. The forepeak is also fabricated into a single unit. Its side shell is held so flangers can remove all unneeded strong backs, and the chippers noisily chisel away high spots. This piece of reinforced shell, now smooth and clean, will become a wall of the forepeak under a special jig. Behind that maze of staging is a completed forepeak, 86 tons of honeycomb steel. Here comes the grandstand play. 4 cranes are waiting to do their duty. The unit is righted slowly into normal position for the first time and gracefully skims over the assemblies to become the forward facade of the ship. Now, deck sections weighing between 30 and 50 tons go aboard. Located between yards 1 and 2 is the prefabrication plant, history-making in the field of mass production. Entire midship deck houses grow to completion on 2 movable assembly lines. Here, the principle of inverted construction spells low cost and speed. At the feed end of these assembly lines, decks are laid out upside down so that welding may be carried on in the easier downhand position. Stateroom cubicles and vertical walls are preformed and welded to their ceilings. Then by the use of special rigging devices and overhead cranes, they are turned right side up, carried to the roller assembly line, and placed on decks that have gone before them in like manner. Now they are in position again to be downhand welded in their permanent location. By this method, the various layers of deck house are assembled, turned, and stacked one on another to make a finished house 3 decks high. As the whole unit moves down the assembly line, piping, plumbing, wiring, galley equipment, and even some furnishings are installed. During the process, the 363-ton deck house is cut vertically into 5 sections, which are separated at the end of the assembly and transported individually to the hull. The first 4 sections of this deck house already are aboard, and the last and largest is being moved over the roadway on portable extensions of the assembly line rollers. Jacks lift and suspended over the roadway. The portable rollers are wheeled away, and a trailer is backed under the house, which the jacks then lower, and off she goes to the shipway. During peak Liberty ship production, Prefab delivered 1 complete deck house a day, with 10 at a time constantly moving down the assembly line. The special slings installed at Prefab are picked up by 2 cranes which carry the section aloft and into position on the hull. But 2 hours have passed since the first deck house unit went aboard. Now only the welding of the seams, the coupling of pipes, and splicing of electric wires at the 3 joints are needed to put the entire midship deck house in working order. The stack, even to the interior painting, is also a product of Prefab. The hanging of the stack indicates that the ship is nearing its final stage. Under old methods, all superstructure was installed after launching, but now the main structural elements go on beforehand. Modern ships are 85% completed on the ways and appear to be finished product before they hit the water. Long steel tubes are transformed into masts in a handy horizontal position. They are 97% finished before going aboard and arrive at the hull with every fitting affixed, including blocks and rigging shrouds. Deftly, they are dropped into close-fitting apertures in the mast house and are anchored firmly to the deck below. They are then ready for final rigging and the connecting of lines to the deck machinery. The rudder, constructed as a unit even to its shafting, is brought to the head of the ways and carried to final position. One of the last and most important ship parts to be mounted before launching is the propeller, which must go to the machine shop for fitting. The various sections of the propeller shaft must be cleaned and made ready for assembly while each of the 12 bearings is seated precisely in advance of installation. After the propeller is pre-fitted to the terminal section of shafting, it goes on its way, an 11-ton bronze symbol of the maritime trade. The great day is approaching. Staging is removed from the stern of our vessel. The launching cradles are ready underneath. The bow is cleared, all is in readiness. The hour is here, and a yard official conducts a brief ceremony while music lightens the occasion. Pictures are taken while the traditional flowers are presented to the sponsor and her party. A clergyman invokes a blessing on the ship and her crew. Down under, the shipwrights drive out final supports. The ship is now resting entirely on the sliding ways. Painters touch up the spots where the supports have been. The trigger mechanism, which alone holds the ship, is cleared. The cable from the launching platform is attached, and the last safety pin is pulled. All is ready.
I christened the SS. Well,
Huddle is smashed. The trigger is pulled. The releasing mechanism drops. Down the waves slides 4,200 tons of Victory steel. Our great hull has become an animate being and now floats on the tide, proudly reared for a gallant future. First to the scene are the ever-faithful little tugs. These powerful miniatures, like ants handling a fly, warp the ship into her outfitting berth where she is completed, from the perfect operation of her machinery to the mounting of guns and the stowing of stores. Modern methods make possible the consistent outfitting of Victory ships in 20 days, while with the less complicated Liberties, it was accomplished in 8. Electricians finish pulling the ship's 58,000 feet of electric cable and make terminal connections. Sheet metal workers run ducts and enclose raceways. Joiners install bunks and furnishings, and the engine room is alive with welders, pipe fitters, and machinists completing mechanical installation. Topside, painters apply coats of red lead to the steel, over which they return to lay a green pigment of zinc chromate. They repeat again with a final coat of war gray. The name on the hull is obliterated, for during wartime she is only a number. Equipment and supplies are swung aboard and secured in place. Anchor chain is hoisted by the newly operating anchor windlass. Up through the hose pipe for the first time, it drops in the ship's chain locker. She's about ready. Steam is up and the machinery is given a thorough test during a 3-hour dock trial. The blue dawn of the next day finds our vessel being prepared for her first sea run. As the sun breaks over the busy yards, she is headed oceanward. First, she stops to drop anchors and haul them in for the rigid anchor windlass test. Now, as she heads out of the bay, she starts her normal power run, 3 hours at full speed ahead. Cutting the water like the veteran we see returning from the battlefront, she reminds her crew of the crying need for her services. As we pass under the Golden Gate Bridge, our code flags give us Navy clearance. Once again, a deeply loaded Liberty recalls our important mission, shortly to be emphasized by the pacing of a submarine war-bound. Our helmsman is steering the test course. Although a binnacle is in front of him, he uses the precision accuracy of the gyro compass and heads for blue water. Shortly, he steers the circle and zigzag maneuver to test the steering engine. Below decks, in the shaft alley, the drive shaft and bearings are watched intently as the revolutions are recorded. Operation of all machinery and parts is examined. The boiler functioning is tallied, and the instrument boards are studied by company and maritime inspectors. At the completion of the power run at full speed ahead, plus an overload run, the engine room crew stands by for the signal for full speed astern, or the crash stop test. The turbine is reversed and she vibrates under her most crucial trial as she comes to a stop. Up forward, red boxes are thrown overboard on signal from the bridge and are clocked as they pass the stern to record rapidity and distance needed for stopping. After a 30-minute run astern, another crash stop is made, this time to full speed ahead. The ocean fairly boils as the propeller bites in with its 6,000 horsepower to reverse the direction of the ship. At the completion of these rigorous maneuvers, she heads for home. The trial board now retires to calculate her sturdiness and efficiency. At the Golden Gate, her identification is announced by the blinker. Her whistle sounds a joyful blast, and the traditional broom, signifying a clean sweep, rises atop the mast to declare to the world that Our Lady has been graduated with honors. The next day, officials representing the Maritime Commission, her builders, and the future operators of the vessel sign delivery papers. It's a perfunctory ceremony without pomp or splendor, highlighted only by the passing of congratulatory cigars. Almost immediately, she leaves to perform her duties, perhaps heading for the ends of the earth. Thus is a victory ship born. At Yard 4, a radically different and novel construction routine is followed. Instead of prefabricating its own sections, Yard 4 purchases its pieces of ships from subcontractors who fabricate them in their own shops throughout California, some of them several hundred miles away. Sections come by truck or trailer or by rail. Those that can float are towed up the bay, while many arrive by barge. This innovation in ship assembling technique relieves Richmond from further congestion and sustains smaller businesses in other areas. Here is an assembly yard, for ship sections are merely joined together into larger units on assembly tables and carried to the shipways by the powerful bridge cranes for final unification and launching. Even the launchings at Yard 4 are different. The launching skids curve abruptly down into the water. The ship must pivot on a rocker cradle as it rides over the hump, at first raising the bow high before splashing into the water. As a gull views the hull, this shoot-the-chutes launching looks like a good ride in any amusement park. Yard 4's outfitting and trial procedure is similar to that of the Victory ship. At Yard 3, construction of a ship takes place in the concrete basin. Erecting a hull on a level is far simpler than on a slanting way, where angles of declivity must be reckoned. Many massive creations in steel, like the forepeak, are built in the assembly area away from the basin. Not the least of these is the 40-foot-high afterpeak. But the biggest prefabricated section in all the shipyards is the C4 hotel unit. When rigged with its special strong backs, its 212 tons are a sizable load even for 4 whirly cranes. And why not? It is the equivalent of an ordinary 4-story building of steel. Among its 4 decks are the bridge, officers' quarters, galleys, pantries, radar and radio rooms, and the pilot house, the nerve center of the ship, where all controls terminate, including the ship's 37 miles of electric cable. When the propeller and rudder go on, she's about ready to be floated. The basin is cleared of all equipment and material. Staging around the bow is removed, revealing the breadth of her 72-foot beam, the grace of her shapely lines, and the peak of her prow, 62 feet above. 2 hours after the ports are opened, she floats level with the bay outside. With the end gate removed, she's ready to be towed out. But wait, here's something different in christening procedure. Sponsor and party take to the air to toast King Neptune again with champagne. Immediately tugs churn and life surges into her as she departs for the outfitting dock, there to be prepared to carry 4,300 persons needing sleeping accommodations and 13,000 meals daily. When the Navy takes a ship like a C-4 transport, a commissioning ceremony is conducted. The assigned personnel stand at attention on deck while the commanding officer makes assignments and reads the orders of the day. Then she's off, a floating hostelry with a capacity equaling San Francisco's 5 largest hotels combined. This was the job at Richmond in the achievement of victory. The delivery of 747 war vital vessels of 9 different types. 519 were the heroic Liberty ships, products of Yards 1 and 2. Yard 4's contribution included 15 LSTs, spectacular invasion craft, 12 heavily armed frigates, convoy escorts, and 24 coastal cargo carriers of 4,000-ton capacity. Yard 3 built 35 C-4 troop transports, which moved armies. Yards 1 and 2 also produced 142 Victory ships. 22 of these were 8,500 horsepower Victories loaded for combat, carrying 2,000 men, 26 landing craft, and full equipment for assault. 120 were fast cargo carriers, a grand total of 747 ships in 4 years. Ships which carried America to victory. While history will glory in those who contended bravely on far-flung continents, there will always be a roll of honor for the valorous men and women who wrought victory through the production of ships. They were not a military body wearing a uniform, but plain average people whose hard hat was an equally respected symbol. Just Mr. and Mrs. America. They loved entertainment, fun, and laughter, and staged their own lunchtime programs, but they never forgot the grim reality of their purpose. They attracted and cheered celebrities who came to pay tribute and to create laughter. Dignitaries from far-off lands, such as Russian Commissar Molotov, inspected their work and approved. They had faith in themselves, these shipbuilders, and faith in the men at the helm, Henry J. Kaiser, who was their inspiration from the start, and Clay Bedford, whose managing genius guided them with determination matching their own. They did more than build ships. 100% of their number bought war bonds, winning the coveted Treasury flag. They challenged the nation, yet competed among themselves. Their teamwork enabled them to be the first to deliver 250 ships and win the nation's initial acclaim. Also the familiar M insignia, to which was added star upon star, until it became the highest award of the Maritime Commission, the Golden Reefed Eagle Pennant. Instead of medals pinned on their chests, the badge over their hearts reflected the symbols of merit they earned, and which flew with the stars and stripes above their battleground. For here, victory was born.